You're watching Broken Hearts of Reddit, another story you won't forget. It's a story about how I once caught her cheating on me with my therapist, but the worst part was their messages. They were discussing how to get rid of me. Our home had never been just a collection of walls and a roof for me. It was a living, breathing organism, the embodiment of peace and permanence. Every corner, every piece of furniture, even the dust on the old bookshelf, everything was imbued with a sense of security, predictability, the very cozy routine that was my synonym for happiness. Mornings began with a ritual I cherished most. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee that Anna, my wife, prepared with special, almost sacred care. She knew my love for that tart, invigorating scent, for the first sip that burned my tongue but warmed my soul. We would have breakfast in the kitchen, flooded with soft, still tender morning light that filtered through the tulle curtains, creating a feeling of weightlessness and purity. We'd exchange plans for the day, light, almost weightless jokes that, over our years together, had become our own private language. Her laugh, a low, melodic sound with a slight huskiness, was the most pleasant sound to me, a confirmation that everything in our world was stable and reliable, that nothing could disrupt this fragile yet strong harmony. I trusted her absolutely, without reservation, as I trusted myself, or perhaps even more. It wasn't just trust, but a deep, unshakable feeling of security, the certainty that I was with a person who would never betray me, never cause me pain, never shake the foundations of my existence. Our evenings were filled with a quiet, almost tangible coziness. Shared dinners cooked with love, watching movies we chose together, arguing and laughing, reading books curled up on the old, worn-out sofa, discussing news that seemed so distant and unimportant against the backdrop of our personal world, or simply enjoying each other's silent presence, which was more eloquent than any words. In this unhurried, measured rhythm of life, I saw the fulfillment of my dream of a happy marriage, of a partnership based on mutual respect, sincere affection, and deep, unwavering understanding. We made plans for the future, talked about the children we wanted to have, dreamed of a house by the sea, of growing old together, hand in hand. Her every touch, every glance, seemed to confirm this unbreakable bond, this absolute certainty in our shared path. I felt truly happy, protected, loved. My work, filled with constant stress and high responsibility, often left me feeling empty, drained to the last drop. I handled complex projects where every decision had serious consequences, and this exhausted me, not only physically, but also mentally. That's why I turned to a psychologist, Dr. Sergey Ivanovich. He was recommended to me by a colleague, a person I trusted implicitly, and whose opinion I always valued. Sergey Ivanovich seemed the epitome of professionalism, calm, thoughtful, with a penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through me, yet didn't judge, but simply understood. His office was an oasis of calm, a place where I could finally breathe, shed the burden of everyday life. Our sessions became a refuge for me, a safe space where I could drop my masks, expose my fears and anxieties, without fear of being misunderstood or judged. I told him everything, about my struggles at work, about childhood traumas that still haunted me, about my deepest fears, and, of course, about my relationship with Anna. I shared every detail of our life together, every nuance of our feelings, every conflict and reconciliation, every moment of joy and every shadow of doubt. He listened attentively, asked precise, sometimes painful questions, and helped me understand myself, my emotions, my reactions. I felt that he was my ally, my guide through the labyrinths of my own consciousness, a person who held the threads of my inner world. He was the one who helped me maintain balance, preserve harmony in my life and in my relationship with Anna, and gave me tools for self-analysis and self-help. I trusted him as implicitly as I trusted my wife, considering him an integral part of my well-being, a kind of anchor in the stormy sea of my psyche. This feeling of complete harmony and mutual understanding with everyone dear to me made my life truly full, rich, and happy. I was certain that my world was built on a solid foundation, and nothing could destroy it. It was in this idyll, in this seemingly flawless picture, that the first, barely perceptible brushstrokes began to appear, ones that didn't fit the usual landscape. At first, they were trifles, so insignificant that I attributed them to fatigue, stress at work, or simply my own inattentiveness. Anna's phone, which used to lie anywhere on the table, on the sofa, on the windowsill, was now always screened down. It became her new, almost obsessive habit. If she got up to go to another room, the phone invariably went with her, even if it was just a trip to the kitchen for a glass of water or to the bathroom for a couple of minutes. She even took it into the shower with her, leaving it on a shelf, wrapped in a towel. I noticed this, but immediately dismissed the thought that there was anything strange about it. Maybe she had just become more careful, afraid that I might accidentally knock it over, or that it might fall, or that she might get a work call at any moment. My mind, accustomed to trust, obligingly provided the most innocent, most logical explanations, not allowing a single shadow of doubt. It was like an invisible wall that was slowly but surely growing between us, but I refused to see it. Then there was the scent, faint, unfamiliar, slightly musky, with a subtle undertone of something sharp, almost animalistic, that sometimes came from her clothes, especially from the pillow in the mornings. It was foreign. It didn't belong to any of our perfumes, any of our laundry detergents, or any of the familiar scents of our home. It wasn't her scent, not mine, not the smell of our house. It was different. I tried to catch its source, sniffing when she passed by, but it always disappeared as quickly as it appeared, like a mirage, leaving only a slight bewilderment in its wake. I asked Anna if she had changed her perfume or bought a new fabric softener. She answered no, or that it must be the smell of a colleague she sat next to at the office, or a new hand cream she had bought. My brain, programmed to believe, accepted these explanations without a hint of doubt, without a single question. I didn't even wonder why a colleague's scent would stay on her pillow, permeating her hair and skin, or why a new cream smelled so strange and so persistent. Sometimes, in moments when she thought I wasn't looking, a strange, unreadable expression would appear on her face, a mix of detachment, a kind of inner anxiety, and perhaps even a hint of guilt. It lasted only a fraction of a second before her face returned to its usual, open and loving expression, like a mask she wore with flawless precision. Her eyes, which usually shone with warmth, would become cold and distant for a moment, as if she were somewhere far away, lost in her own thoughts, inaccessible to me. I put it down to fatigue, to her inner struggles that she perhaps didn't want to talk about, so as not to burden me with her problems. But these fleeting moments still left a slight discomfort in their wake, like a tiny splinter you can't see, but still feel, reminding you of its presence. She became a little more absent-minded, sometimes forgetting our plans or answering distractedly, as if her thoughts were occupied with something else. Oddities began to appear in my sessions with Sergei Ivanovich, too. At first, they were barely noticeable nuances that I immediately dismissed as products of my imagination. He started asking questions that seemed too personal to me, delving too deeply into my relationship with Anna, even for a psychologist. He was interested in our arguments, our intimate moments, my doubts and fears about our future, our plans, our financial matters. I attributed this to his professionalism, to his desire to get to the root of my problems to help me more effectively. But sometimes, his gaze when I spoke of Anna became strange, too intent, too knowing, as if he already knew the answers to my questions, or, even worse, was a part of those answers. He might ask a question that, it seemed to me, was too specific, too detailed to be just a general question from a psychologist. For example, he might ask, "How does Anna react when you leave your phone charging in the living room and go into the shower?" This seemed odd to me, as I had never mentioned where exactly I left my phone or that I ever left it unattended, much less shared my feelings about it. He also began to mention Anna more often in our conversations, even when the topic was completely different, as if she were constantly on his mind. Once, when I was telling Sergei Ivanovich about a small conflict with Anna, about how we couldn't agree on a vacation spot, he suddenly smiled. It wasn't the professional, supportive smile I was used to, not one that expressed understanding or sympathy. It was a strange, almost smug smile that disappeared the moment I looked at it. He immediately adopted his usual serious expression, and I once again attributed it to my imagination, to fatigue, to stress. But that moment left a slight residue, as if something invisible but palpable had slipped between us. He became a little more distant. His answers sometimes seemed canned, and his attention was scattered, as if he was lost in his own thoughts, or in thoughts about something else, unrelated to my therapy. I felt enveloped by the sensation that I was inside some kind of play, where everyone around me was acting their part, and I was the only one who didn't know the script, didn't understand the rules of the game. My world was too perfect, too flawless, to let in a shadow of suspicion, to allow myself to doubt its solidity. I was blind because I didn't want to see. My consciousness desperately clung to the familiar picture, unwilling to admit that the first, barely noticeable, but so dangerous cracks had already appeared on its surface. I convinced myself that it was all just a result of my overwork, that I was thinking too much, that I was simply becoming paranoid. I couldn't entertain the thought that the two most important people in my life, the two pillars of my existence, could be connected by something that would destroy everything I had built. The small cracks that appeared in the first chapter of our life together began to widen, turning into deep, alarming fissures that could no longer be ignored. My mind, which had so desperately clung to the familiar, perfect picture of the world, could no longer deny the growing inconsistencies. I didn't consciously seek them out, but they found me on their own, seeping through the shield of my denial like a poisonous gas, slowly but surely poisoning my existence. Anna started staying late at work more often. Her business meetings would stretch late into the evening, and sometimes into the dead of night. Before, she would always call, warn me, and apologize for being late, her voice filled with regret and tenderness. Now, the messages became shorter, and the tone more detached, almost indifferent. Working late. We'll be home late. Lots of work, dry, lifeless phrases devoid of the usual warmth, as if they were written not by my Anna, but by some soulless automaton. When I tried to ask for details, she would answer evasively, citing project confidentiality, fatigue, or a headache. Her eyes would avoid mine, darting to the walls, the floor, anything but my gaze, which, I felt, could burn right through her. One morning, while cleaning her car, I always tried to keep it tidy for her comfort. I found an unfamiliar coffee cup. It wasn't the brand she usually bought on her way to work, not the coffee shop we went to together. It had the logo of a small but very trendy coffee shop in another part of the city, a place she never went to, and which was not on her way to the office at all. A trifle? Maybe. but it snagged on my consciousness like a splinter, like a sharp shard of glass that was impossible to remove. Then I found a movie ticket for a show she hadn't told me about, and its time coincided with one of her late meetings. It was a movie I had wanted to see with her, but she had said she didn't have time, that she was too tired. I didn't ask her about it. I just put it back, trying not to give myself away, not to show that I had noticed anything. A cold, sticky feeling, like a premonition of disaster, began to grow inside me, increasing with each passing day. The scent, that same musky foreign aroma, grew stronger, more pervasive, almost suffocating. It permeated her clothes, even after washing, seemed to linger in the air when she walked by, and settled on our sheets, in her hair, on her skin. It wasn't just a smell, it was a trace, undeniable proof of someone else's presence in our life, in our home, in our bed. My nose, which had previously perceived it as a coincidence, now recognized it as a warning, an alarm that was impossible to ignore. I began to notice how her habits were changing. She started listening to new music, a genre she had never been interested in before, some aggressive rock that she had always despised, or classical music she had never listened to. New words and phrases appeared in her speech that were uncharacteristic of her, some slang she had never used. They sounded as if she had picked them up from someone else, someone she spent a lot of time with, someone who was influencing her, changing her. And Sergei Ivanovich. His behavior also changed, becoming more obsessive, more strange. He started asking questions that seemed to me not just personal, but almost intimate, touching on the most vulnerable aspects of my life and my relationship with Anna. He was interested not only in our arguments, but also in our reconciliations, our intimate moments, my deepest fears and insecurities. His gaze, when I spoke of Anna, became strange, too intent, too knowing, as if he already knew the answers to my questions, or, even worse, was a part of those answers. He might ask a question that, it seemed to me, was too specific, too detailed to be just a general question from a psychologist. For example, he might ask, "How does Anna react when you leave your phone charging in the living room and go into the shower, and what do you feel at that moment?" This seemed strange to me, as I had never mentioned where I left my phone or that I ever left it unattended, much less shared my feelings about it. He also began to mention Anna more often in our conversations, even when the topic was completely different, as if she were constantly on his mind. Once, during a session, when I was talking about my growing anxiety and how I felt Anna was pulling away, Sergei Ivanovich suddenly said, "Sometimes, to find clarity, you need to let go of what seems familiar, even if it hurts. Perhaps your wife is simply looking for her own path, and you should give her some freedom." His words were spoken with such a strange tone, with such cold calmness, that a shiver ran down my spine. This was not like the usual advice of a psychologist. It sounded like a prediction, or even a call to action. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself that he was just trying to help me deal with a possible relationship crisis. But inside me, another, much more terrifying premonition had already taken root. My thoughts turned into a whirlpool. Her every action, every word, every glance from Sergei Ivanovich was subjected to a meticulous, agonizing analysis. I tried to find innocent explanations, desperately clinging to any opportunity to justify them, to return to my former peaceful life. Maybe I was going crazy? Maybe my paranoia was destroying something that had been so strong, so unshakable. I fought with myself, with this growing suspicion that threatened to swallow me whole, to turn me into an obsessed madman. I couldn't sleep at night, replaying hundreds of scenarios in my head, each one worse than the last. My body began to react to the stress. Constant headaches, trembling hands, loss of appetite, insomnia. I felt exhausted, drained, but I couldn't stop. The world around me began to seem distorted, as if I were looking at it through a funhouse mirror. I felt like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by invisible puppeteers. My world was too flawless to allow a shadow of suspicion, to allow myself to doubt its strength. I was blind because I didn't want to see. My consciousness desperately clung to the familiar picture, unwilling to admit that the first, barely noticeable, but so dangerous cracks had already appeared on its surface. I convinced myself that it was all just a result of my overwork, that I was thinking too much, that I was simply becoming paranoid. I couldn't entertain the thought that the two most important people in my life, the two pillars of my existence, could be connected by something that would destroy everything I had built. The tension grew with each passing day, turning into an unbearable burden that weighed on my chest, not letting me breathe. I felt something inside me tighten, anticipating the inevitable, like before a storm. And then, one evening, when Anna was asleep and her phone lay next to her on the bedside table, I couldn't take it anymore. My hand reached for it on its own, as if guided by some unknown force. I knew her password, the date of our first meeting, a date that now seemed like a mockery. My fingers trembled as I entered the numbers. Each click of the key echoed in the silence of the room. My heart pounded in my chest like a trapped bird, ready to break free. I opened the messenger. There were messages, photos that left no room for doubt. This was not just flirting or a slight fling. These were intimate, explicit conversations, photos where she wasn't alone, but with someone else, whose face was hidden, but whose presence was undeniable. And although the other person's name wasn't mentioned directly, the context, the details, the mentions of places I knew, all pointed to someone who was often in our home, who was part of our circle. My world, which I had so carefully built, shattered into a million sharp shards. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a humiliation, a blow to the very heart, to the very soul. I didn't wake her up. I didn't start a scene. I just lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, feeling a cold, bottomless emptiness fill me from within, pushing out all life. I didn't yet know the whole truth, but I already understood that my life would never be the same. I saw a photograph of Anna in the arms of a man whose face was hidden, but on his wrist, I clearly saw a watch. The same watch I had given Sergei Ivanovich for his anniversary, with the engraving, with gratitude from a client. My world had completely collapsed. The morning after my discovery was the hardest of my life, every moment of it seeming like an eternity filled with unbearable pain. I woke up feeling as if I had been run over by a truck and then dragged over sharp rocks. The air in the room felt thick and poisonous, saturated with the smell of lies and betrayal, and Anna's presence next to me was unbearable, suffocating. I couldn't look at her, knowing she was sleeping just inches from me, and her thoughts were, perhaps, of Sergei Ivanovich, or, even worse, of how to hide her double life, how to continue this monstrous deception. My inner monologue turned into a chaotic, insane stream of questions, accusations, and desperate attempts to piece together the fragments of a shattered reality, to glue back together what had been irretrievably destroyed. I felt like a fool, a blind man who hadn't seen the obvious, even though the signs were everywhere, screaming out. A feeling of shame and humiliation filled me to the brim. Shame that I had believed so much, trusted so much, loved so sincerely a person who was capable of such meanness, such cold-blooded hypocrisy. And shame that I had opened my soul to a person who used my deepest vulnerabilities against me. I didn't wake Anna. Confrontation now would be meaningless, perhaps even dangerous. I needed answers, a complete picture of their monstrous conspiracy. I had to understand how deep they had gone, what exactly they were planning. My hand, still trembling, reached for her phone again. I scrolled through the messages, looking not just for confirmation of the affair, but for proof that Sergei Ivanovich was the man and that they were indeed discussing how to get rid of me. Every message, every smiley face, every hint now took on a sinister meaning. I found their shared photos, taken in places where Anna had supposedly gone for work, or where Sergei Ivanovich was holding his conferences. Their words were full of tenderness, future plans, discussions of how they would handle the obstacles. The obstacle, I understood, was me. I remembered that Anna sometimes used her old tablet to watch TV shows in the bedroom, and it might have her password saved for cloud storage or some messengers she didn't use on her main phone. My hands trembled as I turned it on. My heart pounded in my chest, beating a frantic, violent rhythm, drowning out all other sounds. I found what I was looking for. Not just conversations, but entire archives, diaries of their double life, carefully hidden from my eyes. There were not only messages, but also voice memos, videos, even recordings of their joint sessions, where they discussed me, my problems, my fears, my weaknesses that I had so naively revealed to Sergei Ivanovich. They laughed at my naivety, at my belief in their integrity. What I saw surpassed all my worst nightmares, all my darkest premonitions. It wasn't just an affair between Anna and Sergei Ivanovich. It was a full-fledged, meticulously planned, deeply intimate romance between my wife and my psychologist. My best friend, my trusted doctor, the man I had opened my soul to, turned out to be my wife's lover. Photos, videos, intimate confessions, plans for the future. It was all there, irrefutable proof of their relationship, which, it became clear, had been going on not for months, but for years, possibly since the very beginning of my therapy. They lived a double life, right under my nose, using our home as a cover for their meetings, and me as an unsuspecting idiot, a screen behind which they hid. But that was just the beginning of the abyss. What followed were messages that made my blood run cold and my hair stand on end. They were discussing how to get rid of me. Not just to break up, not just to divorce, but to get rid of me. My gaze slid over the lines, and each word pierced my consciousness like a sharp, jagged knife. He's in the way of our plans. He needs to disappear. How can we do it without a fuss? They discussed various scenarios, from financial ruin so that I would be left with nothing, without means of existence, to staging an accident that would look like a tragic mishap. My brain refused to believe what I was reading. These were not just words. This was a carefully crafted, cold-blooded plan, developed by two people I considered my family, my closest people. I found a conversation where Sergei Ivanovich gave Anna advice on how to manipulate me, using information that I myself had told him in our sessions. He's very sensitive to criticism, especially if it comes from you. Use that. His fear of loneliness is your main card. If he starts to suspect, tell him it's his paranoia. You know he's prone to self-doubt. Every word was a blow. Every piece of advice was a slap in the face. My own weaknesses, my vulnerabilities, which I had entrusted to my doctor, had been turned into weapons against me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a perversion of the very essence of trust, the very essence of therapy. I began to feverishly replay all the events of the last few years in my head. Every conversation, every glance, every little thing. Their business trips were actually joint trips to their second, secret home, where they were building their little nest. Their work meetings were dates filled with passion and lies. Their mutual friends, who, as I now understood, knew or at least guessed what was happening, but remained silent, becoming accomplices in this monstrous deception. Their silence was as much a betrayal as their lies. It was tantamount to complicity. I was surrounded by enemies pretending to be friends, and each of them watched my blindness, laughing behind my back, enjoying my ignorance. My inner world collapsed completely, turning into ruins. Words, thoughts, feelings, everything mixed into a chaotic, unbearable vortex that threatened to swallow me whole. I felt my sanity balancing on the edge of madness, ready to fall into the abyss. Hatred, fear, disgust, profound pain, a feeling of absolute helplessness. It all mixed into a single, unbearable lump that was suffocating me. I was no longer just a betrayed husband. I was a target. I was an obstacle that needed to be removed. My existence had become a problem for them that they were willing to solve by any means, even the most brutal and inhuman. I looked at the sleeping Anna, and her face, which had once seemed so familiar and beloved, now looked alien, sinister, concealing a chasm of betrayal and cold-bloodedness. I was in a trap, and I had to get out before it was too late. I found that they were discussing my finances, my investments, my savings. Sergei Ivanovich, knowing about my income and assets from our sessions, was giving Anna advice on how to get access to my accounts, how to transfer money, how to leave me with nothing. They planned to leave me penniless, so that I couldn't fight back, so that I would be completely dependent and helpless. This was not just a desire to get rid of me. It was a desire to destroy me, to erase me from the face of the earth, to take everything I had. My life, my career, my dreams, all of it was just a resource to them that could be used and then discarded. I felt not like a human being, but an object to be disposed of. In one of the messages, Anna wrote, "He's so naive. He believes every word Sergei says. He thinks he's helping him. It's so funny." And Sergei Ivanovich replied, "Yes, he's great material to work with. Always open, always trusting. The perfect victim." These words burned me from the inside, like acid. I had not just been deceived. I had been mocked, humiliated, used. My pain was entertainment for them. My trust, a source of ridicule. I felt myself being dragged into a web of lies woven by the two people closest to me, and I knew that this web wasn't just holding me, it was suffocating me, slowly but surely, depriving me of air, depriving me of everything. The realization that I was a target, that my every move was being tracked, and that my life was hanging by a thread, pierced me with icy terror. But this terror did not paralyze me. On the contrary, it gave me strength. The entire night after I discovered their messages turned into a frantic preparation for escape. I lay next to Anna, pretending to be asleep, my mind working at a furious pace, calculating every step, every risk. Her even breathing, her calm face, which had once been the embodiment of love for me, now seemed like a mask concealing a chasm of cold-bloodedness and betrayal. I felt not just rage building inside me, but a cold, calculating determination to survive. I was in a trap, in my own home, with a person who was planning my destruction, and I had to get out before it was too late. I couldn't wait any longer. Every hour spent in that house was torture. Every glance from Anna or thought of Sergei Ivanovich was a blow. I had to act. My plan was simple: disappear. Not just to leave, but to vanish without a trace. I began to methodically collect everything I might need for a new life. All the documents I could find, the cash I had at home, credit cards that weren't linked to our joint accounts. I copied all the evidence of their conspiracy messages, photos, voice memos, videos onto several flash drives and uploaded them to cloud storage that only I could access. This was my only weapon, my insurance, my shield. I felt adrenaline pulsating through my veins, sharpening all my senses. Every creak of the floor, every rustle seemed like a signal of my discovery, that they had woken up and were coming for me. I waited for nightfall. When Anna fell asleep, I quietly, like a shadow, crept through the house. I packed a small backpack with the essentials, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, my laptop, and the flash drives. I left a note on the table, short and without explanation, so as not to give them a reason to panic or act immediately. Just, I've left. Don't look for me. It wasn't a farewell, but rather a warning. I didn't want to give them any reason to think I was going to seek revenge or expose them immediately. My goal was to survive. Leaving the house, I didn't look back. I just walked, wherever my eyes took me, away from this place that had once been my home, my refuge, and had now become a deadly trap, a prison. I changed my phone, throwing the old one into the nearest trash can. I deleted all my social media accounts, severed all ties that could lead them to me. I disappeared. To them, I became a ghost that had vanished into thin air, as if I had never existed. I didn't seek revenge, or think about destroying their lives or having them punished. My only desire was to survive, to escape this abyss that had almost swallowed me whole. Months, and then years, passed. I moved to another city, to the other side of the country, where no one knew me. I changed my name, my profession, my habits. I started a new life, but the old wounds never healed. They continued to bleed, reminding me of themselves every day. I live in a constant state of alertness. Every new person, every unfamiliar face causes a panic attack, makes my heart beat faster. I cannot trust no one. Every glance, every word seems to me part of some new, even more sophisticated conspiracy. I see betrayal in the most innocent gestures, lies in the most sincere smiles. My psyche is forever broken, with a deep, unhealing crack that will never mend. I often think of them, of Anna and Sergei Ivanovich, of their new family, of how they might be living their happy life, built on my ruins. Did they achieve their goal, building their happiness on my suffering? Or did their own conspiracy, their own treachery, eventually turn against them, destroying their own world? I don't know, and I don't want to know. My life now is a constant flight from the ghosts of the past, from the shadow of a threat that may still hang over me, waiting for its hour. I can't shake the feeling that they might find me, that their plan is still in effect. Every call from an unknown number, every strange glance on the street, it all makes me shrink in fear. I survived, but I lost much more than just a wife and a psychologist. I lost my faith in people, in love, in the very possibility of sincere, trusting relationships. My world didn't collapse. It turned into a battlefield where every day I have to fight my own paranoia and fear with the shadows of the past that haunt me. I am left alone with the echo of their betrayal that has taken up residence in my soul forever, becoming an inseparable part of it, and I understand that this echo will haunt me until the very end, until my last breath.